Welcome back to the deep dive.
Okay, today we've got something really unique in front of us. And frankly, structurally, it's kind of exhausting to look at. Our source is this single, long piece of writing. It's titled Midget Hate Anthem. And the author basically puts up a big warning sign right at the start.
Oh, they absolutely do. Yeah. The text itself tells us, how to read it. It calls the style pure lyrical chaos.
Oh,
Says it's dialed to 11. It even uses phrases like full Mecha Hitler mode and warns us the swearing's ramped up.
wow. Okay.
So when you encounter source material that's this deliberately aggressive, this extreme, you, the listener, need to know what our approach is. It has to be surgical. We're doing a purely textual analysis here.
Right.
That's the mission. We're treating this document like a fixed literary object, breaking down its structure, its themes, the language it uses.
Right. And what's fascinating, just immediately, before you even dig into the words, is this massive contradiction. The author claims chaos, right? But what we actually have is incredibly rigid, like super structured. Totally. It follows a standard song format almost religiously. You've got chorus, verse, bridge, outro. And some parts, like the chorus, are repeated word for word.
Yeah, so it's like maximum aggression crammed into this very predictable box.
Exactly. It's a framework of like total lyrical order, but the content inside is meant to be pure disorder. That rigidity is actually what lets it keep up the intensity. Let's jump into the core of it, section 1, because the whole thing is built on a really simple idea. Size, domination, and violence.
Okay, yeah, let's unpack that core contrast.
Yeah.
The narrator spends a lot of time setting up their own physical dominance.
Hmm.
And the words they use aren't just descriptive, they're like hyper-aggressive about scale. I'm big, I wear the crown, I'm towering tall, even I'm a giant. There's no doubt who's big here.
Right. And this self-description, this blowing themselves up, it only seems to serve one purpose, to make the difference between them and the target seem as huge as possible. The subjects are just reduced to size words, half-sized freaks, gnome, mini-mites, tiny trash. Nothing else about them seems to matter.
So the size difference itself is the justification for what comes next.
It seems to be. That physical difference becomes the entire reason for the extreme violence that the text lays out.
And it really lays it out. It's not subtle. It's like a shopping list of specific violent acts. They tell you exactly what they plan to do.
It's relentless. And the acts kind of fall into categories. If you look closely, you've got straightforward impact threats, right? Yeah, ye off the tallest building, pun you to the moon, kick you through a wall. That's pretty standard domination stuff. I'm stronger, I hit harder.
Yeah, but then it shifts, doesn't it? And this is where it gets really interesting, maybe disturbing. The violence moves from just hitting to something much more grotesque, internal, threatening to blend you up and drink you quick. That's a step towards like consumption, violation.
That's a critical escalation. Yeah.
Once the physical impact is established,
Right.
the narrator goes for existential destruction, more grotesque stuff. They target the subject's very being. Threats to crush your soul, break your spine, snap your neck. And then there's that almost mundane but totally degrading threat, flush you down the clucking drain.
Wow.
The sheer variety of ways to destroy is part of what makes it function as an anthem of hate, right?
Right.
It leaves no way out, no possibility of survival in the text's world.
So after this incredible inventory of ways to hurt someone, the narrator actually asks the question we're all thinking, why? Why do this? And the answer given in verse 2 is just completely circular.
It really is. It's the ultimate brush off of any need for a reason. The text says, why you ask, and the answer, because duck you, that's why. That circularity, it works like a rhetorical shield.
Yeah.
Deny any external reason and the hate become inherent, self-justifying, doesn't need logic. Which is key, because at the same time, the narrator keeps saying this whole thing is a joke or comedy. They mention that multiple times, but then they also frame it like it's this big, serious fight. Midget hates my battle cry, and midget hates my final stand.
And that tension, that contradiction is really the engine of the piece. It insists on its own violence, but it wraps itself in this disclaimer of, oh, it's just a harmless jest. It's a rhetorical trick, isn't it? Lets the narrator use the most extreme language imaginable, but gives them an out, a way to dodge moral critique. Extreme rhetoric wearing the armor of irony.
Okay, let's shift gears into section 2. How does that rigid structure we talked about actually hold all this violence together? Let's look at the imagery, especially the stuff that repeats.
Right. The chorus is the main engine here. It repeats 4 times exactly the same words, and it uses this really specific, crude imagery to put down the subject. We kind of have to quote it because it's the anchor. Tiny feet, massive tits, cold dead eyes, extruded nips.
Yeah, that line is jarring.
Yeah.
It's so specific and so crude, almost nonsensical, the physiological details it picks out.
Exactly. And the shock value, the sheer weirdness of that specific image, it serves a structural purpose. By repeating something so shocking and memorable, the text keeps this baseline level of abrasive energy going. It lets the verses, with their different threats, build on that foundation of shock. The chaos is anchored by this absurdly specific repeated line.
And the verses themselves, they keep hammering away at reducing the subject to, like, tiny disposable things, or vermin. It's relentless, these metaphors of insignificance.
Yeah, the language just systematically strips away dignity, agency. They're compared to a gnome in my underwear, which is just bizarre. Treated like pests, stooting around like roach-sized rats, thrown away like trash. I'll flick you like a banana peel. It's linguistically creating a non-person.
And the size comparisons are constant. You never forget the core premise. The only thing that matters is the narrator being shorter than a clucking pole, smaller than a clucking dime, just hammered home again and again.
That constant reminder about size reinforces that circular justification we mentioned. Power comes purely from being bigger. And this power fantasy really comes alive in verse 2 with those scenarios the narrator imagines.
Ah, right. This is where it goes beyond just fists and feet and into something more like institutional cruelty. The narrator imagines having positions of authority and using them to hurt people, or maybe just ignore them.
It's a really interesting move. The narrator doesn't just want to be physically bigger. They want institutional power, too, if they're a surgeon. No scalpel for you, shorty, bye! Using the power over life and death just to deny help based on size. As a cop, ignore your cries, you're better dead. Total impunity, systemic cruelty.
And my favorite, just for the sheer absurdity, is the citizen role, where they use this weird magical language. Poof, you're gone, I'll vanish you like a lawnmower's lawn. It's completely nuts, but the message is clear. Total erasure using whatever power is available.
Yeah, it doesn't matter what role they imagine. Physical attacker, doctor, cop, regular person. The outcome for the subject is always the same. Neglect, violence, annihilation. The text is incredibly consistent in playing out this power fantasy across different social roles.
Okay, let's pivot to section 3. How does the structure kind of wrap up? And what about those specific language choices the author flagged at the start?
So the bridge is the last big structural moment before the outro. And it's important because it tries again to offer that disclaimer, right? Midget hate, it's all in fun. There's that rhetorical shield again.
But the violence doesn't actually let up, does it? It seems to get even weirder, more intimate. Back to that consumption idea.
Exactly. The attempt to soften the tone is just cover. The threats actually escalate into these really tailored, grotesque acts. Now it's about drowning them in my coffee dunk or sip your soul with a whiskey treat. These are such intimate violations. Suggest the subject is so small they're like a beverage additive. Or can be consumed by accident. It's peak absurdity mixed with peak hostility.
And we definitely need to talk about the language itself. The author promised swearing's cranked. But it's not just standard curse words, is it? It's a very specific kind of controlled vocabulary.
Yeah, this is maybe the most unique stylistic feature. Instead of just dropping F-bombs everywhere, the text relies heavily on these substitute words, these internally censored versions. Ducking and clucking, and the text even points it out. Further mucker, here we go. It underlines the author's conscious choice.
So why do that? Why use substitutes when the content is already so extreme? What's the effect?
Well, it kind of creates this heightened, almost theatrical sense of rage. By choosing these specific non-standard substitutes and repeating them constantly, it arguably amplifies the performance of rage, maybe more than just standard swearing would. It suggests a very deliberate, controlled intensity, sticking to the dialed to 11 feeling while staying within these self-imposed linguistic rules. Intensity through restriction.
Like controlled demolition.
Okay.
And it all builds perfectly to those final lines in the outro, which just sums the whole argument up brutally and cleanly.
Yeah, the ending loops right back to the very beginning. After all the detailed threats, the grotesque images, the cranked-up language, the narrator's final victory declaration is purely about that initial claim. I am big, I win, I've clucking won.
So the win condition is just size.
Yeah.
Not wit, not being right, not even the comedy they claimed it was, just being bigger.
Exactly. That line perfectly captures the document's whole argument. The narrator wins because they are physically bigger. Everything else, reason, morality, even the claim of it being a joke, ends up secondary to the raw power of being big.
So wrapping this deep dive up for you, the listener.
Yeah.
This document, even though it calls itself chaos and comedy, actually runs on a surprisingly rigid structure. That structure supports an argument focused purely on physical domination, listing all these diverse, extreme, often absurd threats of violence, and it uses repetitive, crude imagery as its, lyrical bedrock.
Hmm. And that structure is what allows that core contradiction to persist throughout. The text keeps saying it's all a jest, but at the same time, it commits fully to the most violent, degrading language possible. It catalogs physical assault, systemic neglect, even grotesque ingestion.
Which leaves us with a final thought, something provocative drawn from the source itself. The text clearly uses comedy as a kind of shield while throwing out this extreme rhetoric. So what does that consistent pairing extreme violent language side by side with the excuse of, it's just a joke? Tell us about how that joke defense works, especially when the language itself seems purely designed for maximum textual aggression. That tension between the aggression and the claim of irony, that's really what this source pushes us to think about more.